I'm Nicole Carter. I'm the author of Sketchnoting in the Classroom, and I'd like to share a few ideas and tips with you.
For today's video, we're going to talk about how to draw icons.
Okay, everyone, we're just going to go ahead and dive in. You know, one of the first things we learn to draw when we're little and we start to hold a pen is to draw kind of these really scary stick figures or people looking humanoids. But then we start moving on to icons and symbols. And so keeping that in mind, we'll start simple and just think about, you know, those 5 basic elements, or in this case, you have access to this visual alphabet from Sunny Brown. What kinds of symbols and shapes that we can stack together to create images in its simplest form. And I'm just going to kind of zoom in a little bit so that I have access to more space as I'm drawing. And we're going to keep these kind of small so we can kind of just fill in this entire blank space right here. But the first thing we're going to start to draw is a house. So thinking about those 5 basic elements, a square, a triangle, a circle, a line, and a dot. If we think about a house, and of course this is also another place where our brain can kind of be tricky because it depends on your background and your memories, and when we say the word house, are you actually thinking of a specific type of house? Or if you grew up in New York City, for example, you're used to living in apartments and high-rises, your version of a house is going to be different than maybe our suburban view of a house. But in keeping a traditional idea of a suburban house, we typically are going to just add a square with a triangle on top, or a rectangle with a triangle on top here. So we're going to draw a square to start, and then we're just going to draw a triangle over it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and claim that I'm like the world's best artist. I'm not. I've let go of judgment at this point, but it's really about, again, the process over creating something, a perfect piece of art. So our brain knows its context here is that we were drawing a house. This is good. Like our brain can understand what this is. But if we have enough time to go ahead and add some additional details, again, still rectangles, maybe some squares. We've got some lines, maybe a dot for a door, right? A door handle. Maybe another rectangle for a chimney. We're good. We've added some details. We can clearly identify that that is a house. Right next to our house, let's put a tree. A happy little tree, if you know Bob Ross. And what kinds of symbols can we put together to create a tree? Oftentimes when I ask that, students will come back and say a cloud. So yeah, let's put together, let's put together a cloud shape. And then you can choose to either just do 2 lines or to do a rectangle on the bottom, your choice. I was in a 4th grade classroom where a student said, "Oh, a triangle, Mrs. Carter, a triangle." And at first my brain was like, a triangle? What is this kid thinking? But as I drew it, I was like, yeah, duh, it's like a Christmas tree or a pine tree. Totally makes sense. That totally works. Again, it's this amazing thing called a brain and the images and the things that our brain is putting together to see said images. All right, so I know one of the options that I do with the students when we listen to a podcast, they talk about drink cups. So when I say the word cup, oftentimes it depends on your interpretation of that word cup, how you might put that together. If you're thinking of just a basic, water drinking cup, you're going to start with just a flattened circle. And then you're going to come down with 2 lines that are not entirely straight. They kind of come towards each other. And bada bing, bada boom, you're done with a cup. You can put a little wave line there for water or some sort of liquid there in the cup. But sometimes people think in terms of like a coffee cup or a tea cup, in which case we'll start with our same kind of flattened circle. We'll do a little arc and then maybe a couple more arcs off to the side. So again, it just depends on how you interpret the words that you're learning. So let's kind of move into some objects that we might see in the classroom. So we'll start with a book, and we'll start with a rectangle for the book. And then let's say this is like a textbook. This also could work for a composition notebook. So we'll draw a little line. I usually never connect them. It's not one full long line. And then a composition book or a textbook usually has some like block for a title. I might also add like a few pages up here at the top to make it look like it's more 3D like, I guess. But that could be either, again, a textbook or a composition book. Speaking of composition book, let's do a quick spiral notebook. This is one of my favorite ones to draw anytime I'm referencing notes or anything. I'm going to make my pen just a little bit thinner since I'm pressing a little bit hard. And all we're going to do on the side here is just add loops all the way down. Loop, 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 loop. Okay. And if you wanted to, you could add some lines. Doesn't really matter. You can leave it blank if you wanted to. And that one's nice and super easy, but you definitely get the idea of what it is. Okay, I like to show the kids a pencil also, pencil and pens. So a pencil would just be a simple, skinny rectangle and a triangle on one end. And then sometimes if I have to, I'll just color in the tip of the triangle. And then depending on if it's a new pencil, you might have a square eraser, or you can even do a little arc as well. And then right next to it, we'll draw a little pen. We'll start with the pen cap. Just kind of just a, how do you describe that? A rectangle with an arc on one end. And then you'll do a skinny rectangle just like you did with the pencil. And maybe not a super sharp rectangle, or triangle, I mean, to do the pen tip. Oh, I forgot to do some books that are like open. And I love this story because I used to always just teach this version. We're going to start with a wide V, and we'll come down with some sides here to create an M shape, and then close that off with another V. And I used to do this twice, right? I used to do a version with the book facing away from us and then a version with the book facing us. But this time we'll stick with the book facing away. We'll do a center line down the center. And then we'll add that box again for the front side. And then I'll maybe just add a few more pages here. And I always say, you know, I mean, if your brain does not see that as a book, then don't draw that. Draw this version instead, right? It just all depends on what you physically see, right? So I was in a 7th grade class over at Meadow Park in a science classroom, and a student said, okay, Mrs. Carter, what if we drew this shape, you know, like a seagull? I was like, yes, I know exactly where you're going with this, and I love it. So let's draw that shape, and we're going to just connect those two lines. Draw a line down the center again. And then this is maybe where you draw, maybe this is like a textbook, so there's like an image or something. Sure. Right? Usually the title there at the top. And if I wanted to make it look like it was more 3D, usually have one, yeah, like that. And I love it. So that's coming straight from a 7th grader over at Meadow Park. Okay, what are some other options? You'll typically find when you take a look at some of my notes that I draw a lot of the same things over and over again. I think it depends. You know, if you're in a science classroom, you really want to focus on some materials and things that the kids might use when they're learning about science, right? So because I learn so much or take in so much information that's all about kind of educational technology, I definitely draw technology a lot. So let's go ahead and draw a cell phone. And usually when I say a phone, I usually say just a phone. Let's draw a phone. And then this is where our brain comes in again, and our age demographic too, because if I say a phone to adults, oftentimes they'll think about a phone that's plugging into the wall. Whereas if I say a phone to kids, they'll think cell phone without me saying cell phone. So in this instance, we'll just draw a rectangle, and we'll do another rectangle inside of it. And we'll do a little dot down at the bottom. And because it's a reflective surface, I like to draw these little guys. And again, if we drew that exact same shape, just a little bit bigger, of course now our phones are just about as big as a tablet, aren't they? We get a tablet. I also like to show them how to draw a Chromebook. So now that we've learned how to do a screen, we do the same kind of process, a rectangle within a rectangle, reflection. Then we're going to do a parallelogram coming off of that and connecting those two lines. We're going to draw our keyboard. Instead of drawing a ton of little individual keys, we'll just do another rectangle with some lines. And then we'll do some lines off to the side. Some lines that come down in the center and then off to the side as well. And we've created a little space bar, which I love. And we'll do our little trackpad. And then to create it more of a 3D effect, I do these little table legs. I did this morning in a 5th grade class, and my table legs were pretty long so that the kids could see it. And one of the kids said, "Whoa, that's a thick laptop." I said, "Yes, it is. Thank you for pointing that out." So I'm trying to do a thinner laptop for you here. That's maybe more representative of what we now have because technology is so thin. So there you go. So those table legs, if you just connect the ends, you're going to get more of a 3D effect. A few other things that I like to draw. I ask the kids about time. Signify time with like a wall clock. Usually, for the most part, I can get away with just doing this. But then from this shape, you can obviously create like a mantle clock if you needed to. You could easily change that into a watch if you needed to. I also sometimes think about dates. And I will often think about the app on my phone. Today is the 5th. But you definitely could do a simple calendar as well. Today is October, right? So, and then just a few lines if you needed to show kind of like a calendar. I draw light bulbs all the time, right? Especially in like close reading strategies. These mean that I have a big idea. So we're going to start with a rectangle, finish the top off with a balloon-like shape, draw a few lines, draw a V. Nice and simple. I know it's not completely correct. Science teachers, don't kill me. But it gets the job across. I also think it's important to think about different icons and shapes. So, I mean, I use hearts. I use lightning bolts sometimes. My lightning bolt looks horrific. I'll color it in and make it better. I use exclamation points and question marks a lot because obviously if I have a question, I will put that in there. I also like to ask the kids if they know the difference between a speech bubble or a thought bubble, or maybe put that in the next portion where we're on the back and we're talking about containers because I want to leave a little bit of space here for some people. So we're going to go ahead and, I also wanted to mention, depending on if I'm going to zoom in again, hopefully I'm not making anyone sick. I draw a world a lot, or my representation of a world. I mean, I try not to get too specific about shapes. I mean, come on. Looks pretty horrible, actually. But if you go in and you color that in or something, or you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I don't know what that means. As I said before, just identify it by, yeah, that's Earth. It's up to you. All right, we're going to stop it there. Thank you so much for joining me. And don't forget, you can find my book on Amazon.